In any case, it's clear that even with Gertrude, her garment is also full of light, not just Christ. Christ says, I am the light of the world in John 8:12. But he doesn't end there. In the Gospel of Matthew, he's also pointing to his disciples and saying, you are the light. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Let it radiate out from your being. And so the faces have no shadows. It's one of the reasons why an icon will always appear to be somewhat flat. And why people for long periods of time have rejected iconography, even in Oriental churches. Because they say, I really like the Western approach where there's much more of the whole formation of the person with the shadowing and giving us 3 dimensions to the character of this person. We'd like to see a little more shapeliness to Gertrude or to the Christ child or to Mother Mary. But the icon can't speak of that because there can't be any shadows, because if this is a window into heaven, into eternity, Scripture is clear. There's no darkness on the other side. It's a place where all is light. There's no sun, there's no moon, so their faces aren't going to be lit up from the outside. We become light. Archbishop Breyer used to always say, you become what you contemplate. All the more reason why when we come into the church, we venerate the icon, because we're bowing our brain. This is, and for all of us growing up in the well, some of you maybe haven't grown up in the Western world, but for those of you that have grown up in the Western world, it's as if this is the only part of the body that's going to be saved. That's one of the dangers and heresies that has often come up mostly out of the Western world, that Jesus comes to save souls, not human beings. That just your brain capacity. Jesus doesn't save souls. When he comes out of the tomb, he was a fully alive human being. And so we proclaim the resurrection of the body. Christ didn't need to resurrect. You need to resurrect. And that's what we're celebrating, that Gertrude, she has experienced death, biological disintegration, but not elimination. She exists because her being is tied with the light of Christ. And I refer to people that are iconoclasts, and oftentimes not even knowingly, many of us, I was giving a talk to a group of Trappists, very holy monks, and telling them that they were all heretical iconoclasts, because in their church, they don't use any imagery for the most part, and for good reasons. I mean, theirs is a movement of austerity, of simplicity, of staying focused on the one thing necessary. We can take any of my comments to an extreme, and if you have somebody in your life you want to beat up that's an iconoclast, you can go ahead and use my words, but it really, that's not the point. With the iconoclastic movement, there was this insistence that God could not be imaged because God is invisible, and the icon is proclaiming, no, God has entered into the material world, and therefore we are allowed to make manifestations of that material identity, but we don't know everything about that material. We don't even know everything about St. Gertrude, so we don't paint the backside. We don't tell you everything about Jesus. It's very clear from this icon. This is painted in humility, with the notion that this is what I can know about Jesus Christ, but not everything. And also, for those that might be confused about veneration and kissing icons, I'm so glad, fortunately there's more and more influence from other cultures, Christian Catholic cultures in the Western world, where a lot of Catholics don't have any problem kissing things and touching things. Sometimes, it freaks those of us out that didn't grow up with that. But we know that this is just where we're starting. If this is a window, we're passing through it. We're not stopping with, we're not going to pretend that God is in the gold or God is confined to the egg tempera. or to this wooden board. But God does use the material world. God uses stars to save people's souls. God uses trees and bushes and plants. Sometimes it's a flower. Sometimes it's just the smallest of things to bring light into somebody's eye when all they've ever seen is darkness. And I also believe that's why, for me, as a teacher of iconography, I'm not a great iconographer. I'm a good copyist. And that's what I teach. I even, there were lots of students, I better erase this picture here lest somebody thinks I'm giving a more intelligent talk. I have often thought that, I was teaching in Hawaii, and this wonderful woman that would set up the class, she wanted it to have a very dignified name. So every time we had a class in Honolulu, it was called Holy Art Thou, School of Sacred Arts and Iconography. And then in another place, it was a Holy Wisdom, School of Sacred Arts and Iconography. And so people, would approach you, and I'm sure the young man that's here that's also teaching iconography, sometimes people think that you have this great insight into all the mysteries of iconography. Well, I have a fair number of my students here, and they know the height of my ignorance in many fields. And I would really prefer to call, and I don't mean it just as a joke, but if icon, UConn School of Iconography, because I came into this as somebody who had zero art experience. And a man connected with this little church downstairs when it was at 20th and Lake, who I just thought he was a homeless kook. And he came to the monastery at one point, and the abbot said to me, well, he's going to teach you, we need to have one of the monks learn how to paint icons. Well, I knew Dominic from the soup kitchen down here at St. Anthony's. And I thought, he can't teach me how to paint icons. He lives under the bridge over at such and such a place. Well, I came to find out that Dominic painted beautiful icons and very holy images. Even there's a church, a little Russian Orthodox church, right down the way that he helped to paint, and a number of churches here in the city. He just did it, unlike myself, without waving his own flag. You would never have known it. And his emphasis on teaching was he didn't need me to be an artist. He just needed me to follow these practices, these disciplines. And if I would just be willing to copy what he told me to do, I'd be able. So he made a board that had 15 images. It was just one board, not much bigger than this. 15 images, 5 images here, 5 here, 5 here, with all the different steps on it. He made me sit next to him, and he did each step in front of me, and he said, there, you take this. You're going to have to learn how to do this on your own, because I'm joining Mother Teresa's brothers in Tijuana. And I promised my Russian Orthodox teacher, she told me she would teach me everything she knew, as long as that when I was done, I would pass the work on to somebody else. So I teach a very simplified method of iconography. The man that painted this probably knows a lot more than I know. He's going to beat me up after class because he's going to be shamed by me saying all of that, but it is really true. Even in class, some of these students that are here now, their first icon, they'll be struggling, and the nose won't be exactly right, or the eye won't be right, or the color they got wrong, or there's some defect. And it's not right, and just going. And I thought, oh my gosh, if my first icons looked anything like Keiko's, I would have been so full of myself they would have never let me paint another icon. Father Michael came in after I finished my first icon of John the Baptist, and I thought it was like almost a miracle, that I could paint this. I didn't know what I was doing. It looked great to me. And Father Michael came in, he was kind of keeping an eye on me, and said, what are you doing? what is that? And I said, well, it's a saint. And he said, well, why does it have a horse right smack in the middle? I said, that's not a horse, that's John the Baptist. The nose was too long. And a person of more fragile character would have said, oh, well, that's the last icon I ever painted. I just took it away from him, and I said, well, he doesn't know what he's talking. Who cares if he's an expert? And I went ahead and just kept painting until, I got confident enough there. I would show my icons, and sure enough, people said, yeah, we can put that icon in the church. It wasn't until maybe 10 icons later, St. Anthony got put into the church at the monastery. And then eventually they even let me paint the iconostas. But the whole notion of the icon also being a vessel of prayer, not just that you, who might not paint icons, will pray in front of this window. And we use that term window a little differently. This window is letting light come through. This window lets light come through it as well. But there's nobody on the other side of this window. This window has somebody who's constantly viewing you, wanting to be in a communion with you, a relationship of communion and unity in your life. It's one of the reasons why people say, well, why don't they smile? I mean, couldn't my icon have a few little teeth just showing so it looks a little bit happy? And I have to explain to people that, and this actually happened in China during the Olympics in China. In a lot of cultures, this has been a big deal even during the Olympics in Russia. Many people, especially in the East and in Oriental cultures, smiling when you show your teeth is actually a sign of aggression. And it's not like the most respectful way to approach a person. But in China, when they were telling people, especially the Americans, they said you can get away with not smiling with the Germans or with the French, but when American Olympiads get off the plane, you have to show them their teeth. Welcome to China. Welcome to that they required this teeth show. And they just found that so strange. There was this video clip showing these kids looking at the instructor saying, you can't be serious that we're supposed to do this. What could that possibly communicate except get out of here, go away? No wonder they don't like the Chinese. But the disposition of the icon is so that they can be used for prayer. If you've just experienced something terrible in your life, you're not going to pray in front of a smiling Jesus who's just come off the surf in California here. There is that surfing Jesus that everybody refers to with the bright, shiny white teeth and all and long blonde hair, but that scares some of us because it's just really hard to pray in front of that Jesus. This is an image that moves beyond, anybody's particular. We're trying to move beyond your particular prejudices, so that we're not even pretending that Christ ever wore blue and red. Blue is a color of glory. Red can also be a color of glory. Some would suggest that the red is a color of divinity. The blue is the humanity that he takes upon himself. I've heard also said that blue, they're both colors of, in a sense, of glory. And when you think of the blood that's in your veins, you're all blue-blooded. Until it gets oxygenated, it then becomes red. And so, and especially the Mother of God is always dressed not in blue. Her undergarment is blue. Her outer garment is red. And it's usually a very rich, deep red that suggests blood. Oxygenated blood. And I don't even know if that's a word, but blood has had air attached to it. We used to always make fun of poor Father Abbot Boniface at Mount Tabor because he was from another country, and so he was always just making words out of English, and they always seemed to work. And I've just found that it helps. If you can't think of the right word, just make one up and say whatever comes out. And in art classes, especially when people don't know too much about Byzantine iconography, people start writing down my words, and before long I'm thinking, oh dear God, she's going to go home and look at the dictionary and find out that I just made that one up. But this whole notion of this being a window means that you have a place to be encountered by God. The only thing that I would suggest is that rather than thinking of yourself as the viewer when you come to pray in front of an icon, is to see yourself as the one being viewed. We always want to put ourselves in that we're in control of this relationship. No, this is like, Gertrude thinking that her hand, she was touching God, and in fact God was consuming her. When we receive the sacraments, the holy mysteries as we call them in the Eastern Church, when you receive Holy Communion, you're not eating God, you're not consuming God. God is consuming you. You're being in communion with God. He's taking you into himself. It's not you eating God. And so again, if you think of the icon backwards, then that helps a little bit. I always feel like, you have to put your hat on if you're going to say something important. The other thing about this, and of course you get to wear that big hat, that's I figure in church, even if I don't say the right thing, I've got the hat on, it's going to look better. And being a visualist, that's very important to me. But when I look out this window here, I can't see much because there's another building right in my way, but let's pretend that you people get to see beauty out the window, that you get to see, you can see the sky, but let's say there was a road and trees and all of that stuff, and I'm going to sit here and draw that out or paint that out. I am going to create what we normally think of as kind of a natural perspective, where there's a road leading out that way with hills in the background, maybe with the sun here and clouds. And if there were a tree here, that same kind of tree, even if it was bigger, is going to be really small, or at least smaller in the back. If there were fence posts, they're going to get diminished as they go off into the distance till all we see is little sticks. But most importantly, that road is going to vanish in the distance. Things are getting smaller as they disappear in my view because I'm the viewer. I'm the one in control of what I'm seeing. When you're standing in front of an icon, it's not like that. If you're being viewed and being encompassed, then what we do is we reverse perspective. And I'm sorry it's little, but you have a beautiful image of this down in your church down below, so you can always look at this down in the church. But if you follow the lines in an icon like this, it's very clear that unlike this perspective, it's reversed. Those little pedestals, they're getting smaller as they move closer to you. The vanishing point would normally be in an icon that way. In iconography, we've turned it around towards you. So again, if there is a vanishing point, it's behind you, the viewer, which means you now have a place at this table. You are invited into communion and union with these three persons that we oftentimes refer to this as the Holy Trinity, and that's commonly enough a pious way to approach this, but it's a symbol of the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity can never be imaged. These are the three angels that visited Abraham and Sarah. Saint Rublev happened to kick Abraham and Sarah out of the picture. I always feel a little bit bad about that, and so whenever I've painted this icon, I usually do it as a triptych and put them as two door panels so that they get a place at the table once again. Because if it wasn't them welcoming the three angels to their table, we wouldn't know about this mysterious story. And it is really wonderful, again, just like your church downstairs, if you look carefully at all of the little secret messages in the ceiling, you'll also come to find in this icon, with every icon, it's full of secrets. But not esoteric Gnosticism that's meant to keep knowledge just for a few special souls. This was meant to be readily available to every person praying with it. The whole reason why there's reverse, anybody coming in front of this icon, just like Ellen at the thrift store up in Santa Rosa, to say to her that face of Christ, even if she was a Unitarian Buddhist, whatever the heck that is. I said to her, Ellen, what does that mean? How can you be a Buddhist and a Unitarian at the same time? And she said, well, I'm just, all in, and she was a lovely, lovely person. And who knows, she's probably a much better Christian than I'll ever hope to be. She just doesn't know it yet. But still, that icon, just like this icon, speaks to people, whether they have the knowledge of what this story is or not. But part of what is happening here is there's a house behind this angel. This is the only angel that isn't clothed in a very refined, formed pattern of color. This is a swirl underneath the garments of this angel. It's a whole mixture, they've determined, of almost every color in the iconographer's palette. It's just a swirl, because this is the Father angel, or the God, the first person of the Trinity, that can't have a body, doesn't have a form. This is the immaterial, unnameable, unseeable God, person. But they're the Father's house that is referenced in Scripture, that in my Father's, there's room for everybody. There will be a place for all of us in the Father's house. But it's also the house of Abraham and Sarah next to the oak of Mamre. So it's a reference to the historical Scripture event, but turning it all into a story of salvation, because the tree is behind the Christ angel, who is dressed in the traditional color of a red undergarment, a blue outer garment. Here, this undergarment is very blood colored, very reddish, blood reddish color. But he also has a sash on, suggesting the Byzantine connection with the ability to speak, logos, to proclaim a word. They all have angel wings, even though Abraham and Sarah didn't see any wings, but they were messengers. And angel is just connected with that whole notion of message. Just an interesting point, Byzantine angels are always dressed, people want to know about all the symbolism of angels in iconography. Well, they're dressed as postal workers. The uniform of the postal worker of the Byzantine Empire. They have a little thing in their head, they have a little staff, and it was a very practical thing, because if you were running through somebody else's yard, even with a message from the empress, the emperor, or somebody in the royal court, and they don't know who you are, they had every right to shoot you down, as probably happens in San Francisco. And the postal workers have to, wear special uniforms. This is a dangerous city you people live in. And that's why so many of us are so ready to go back to the hills. And each of these angels has the postal worker's staff. They're each carrying a staff. Those aren't cracks in the wood. We know this is both a Slavic icon, done in the Slavic tradition, and that this is the Holy Spirit, because in the Slavic tradition, green is the color for Pentecost. Ukraine, Russia, Georgia, that part, Eastern Europe, is all white most of the winter. At the time of Pentecost, life comes forth, and the name for the Spirit is the giver of life, life giver, the one from whom all life comes. That's why you're chrismated, you're anointed in oil by the power of the Holy Spirit, so that all of this energy of God, the energies of God, can be activated in you, so that you become vessels like this. I know now I'm more than way over time, so I better just let you ask some questions, so that some of you may want to, as sad as it is, you might want to go home after this is all done. Are there some questions? Sister in the back.
Answer on I often hear the painting, or you write an icon and you read an icon. Not necessarily do you just look at an icon and say, how pretty it is. So
Thank you, sister. It oftentimes come up. A lot of people will really emphasize that we need to speak about writing icons and not painting them. Generally, at least from what I've understood from Greek iconographers, that distinction is if it helps people, that's good. But the actual Greek word of iconographia, graphia is actually what's used for writing, but it's also what's used for painting. So, and I do find, maybe it's just because I get so easily confused, I don't say writing, but I'm not offended by people that will say, that they're writing an icon, because they're communicating the Word of God in color and form. So in that regards, that's perfectly, and if that helps people, then you say you're writing on it. Yes, sir?
What I'm about to say, you probably said that already. Someone once told me the main difference in the spiritual concept between the Western tradition of depicting human beings as saints and the Eastern Rite tradition. The Western tradition, three-dimensional, painting on the picture represents this world right now, whereas the two-dimensional, the Eastern tradition, the whole thrust is to point to the otherworldliness, the spirituality of the next world.
That's an excellent point. If you don't mind, I'm going to repeat it just so all of you can hear this. Sometimes, and again, that's a respectful way of saying this. A lot of the Western Christian approach to art is wonderful, and it's beautiful, and it's very insightful. So this isn't a criticism of other approaches to Christian or even sacred art. But generally, in this approach to three-dimensional work that we might exhibit in Western art, it's more of a reference to Christ and Mary or the saints as they existed here. So we're showing them with light hitting them, as they would have lived in our world. We're showing them sometimes as historical people, maybe in the setting of the time in which they lived, or in our time. There are a lot of examples in the Renaissance where they painted, the city of Milan, or Florence, or their city in the background of Mother Mary holding baby Jesus, to make these saints and holy people present to them in their world. In icons, we are doing the opposite. We're making a reference to them outside of time and history and place, which is why this mystery of the incarnation can be venerated now, not as just a historical reality, and not that we wouldn't want to say that it didn't. We would not say that it is a historical reality, but we're taking out the historical context, and we're making it a theological reality, and we're venerating the theological reality, not the historical reality. If we were going to just emphasize the historical reality, we would try to show her as a Palestinian Jewish woman of that period of time when Christ was born, and we would certainly show him as a little itty-bitty baby in the arms of his mother. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not condemning that. I oftentimes do get, there are iconographers that'll be not certainly in this room, I hope, because we'll have to take you downstairs and do a re-washing of you. But that get very anal retentive about the approach to icon, and that it has to be this way, and this is the only way that it has to be done. Now, some of my students here will contradict me and say that I did tell them that they had to do certain things in class, but that was only so that the other students didn't suffer because of their creative notions. In general, we don't think of iconography as a creative art form, which I know offends artists, in that it's meant to be a method for prayer. So we give you this box, and you have to stay within the box. Inside the box, you're free. Mary has to always wear a reddish blue kind of outer garment. She almost always has a blue undergarment. There are certain colors for Christ. There's certain arrangements. This particular prototype of Mary, just like the prototype of Our Lady of Kazan, or Our Lady of Tenderness, where their faces are touching. There's certain models that you have to follow. But inside that, then you're free to pray. was meant to be a method for prayer. I'm sorry, you had a question, and maybe I've got you over the top already.
I was just going to ask, I took iconography classes with Father Brendan McInerney,
Oh, yes.
but he teaches to paint icons with acrylics, and I wondered if you have an opinion on that.
I used to be very opinionated, but I have been healed of that because I had so many acrylic students in my class that have hurt my little fingers when I said, "Acrylic? You're painting with plastic? What does that have to do with the glory of God?" Well, for the most part, that's, referencing that board that I had here, which I'm always losing things, as long as the mind is somehow attached. By using all natural materials, this is a plug for the natural approach, but I'm going to get back to the acrylic question. There's an integration that takes place here. I have used animal skin glues to saturate this wood. We're using a method that was probably, and my apologies to the Greeks, it could be that they are right about this. There's some argument as to whether the Greeks or the Egyptians came up with the first efforts at sealing wood with skin glues. We have images both in Asia and in northern Africa that are still together after thousands of years. So the artists in that part of the world have to be given some credit for knowing how to expertly work natural materials together so that 5,000 years later, we have some images in Egyptian artwork that still exist today. Because there's an integration between wood that has been properly prepared, saturated with skin glues. Then this is a piece of linen that I can't pull off of here, which also makes this into an altar. It's an old altar linen. And this becomes the altar where God is made present, just like we believe in the holy mysteries. Then there's gesso, layers of gesso, and all of this stuff, once we free you from the torture of listening to me, you can come and touch all of this stuff. None of this is untouchable, except maybe the brother that has done these icons may not want all of you hurting any of his work. But then we put a layer of gesso on here. If I did this in plywood, and then applied acrylic gesso, which you have to put down if you're going to use acrylic paints, the bond is not integrated. It's not this kind of a bond. Just scientifically speaking, it's this kind of a bond. It's a synthetic bond that, and you know it, if you've ever painted with latex or acrylic paint heavily, you can actually peel those layers apart. Egg tempera wax. Is this egg tempera? That's good. It is egg tempera. I didn't want to be too critical until we got the smell. Raymond is the one who has painted these beautiful eggs. And he brought them in for me to critique. I can't critique. Again, if I were ever as good of an icon painter as he is, I'll be grateful. It's beautiful work, and it's prayerful work. Plus, he has two little icons that he's carrying around. They were the background choir, along with a couple of other little munchkins there that were helping to keep us colorfully attuned.
So must you have a teacher, an official teacher like you to teach you how to do
Must you have an official teacher? Well, Raymond, no. There are a lot of people that learn on their own because some people can take books and let those books be their teacher. And I'm not opposed to that. Also, and I will put a plug in here because you told me to.
You have a book we could purchase?
No, I don't have a, no, dear God, no, I can't write. And I'd make up all kinds of words that it would be indiscernible too, maybe. But we are going to have an icon class at the monastery. We already have a couple of people signed up, and we can't really deal with more than 12. But if you want to learn this process, even if you don't want to come to my class, Raymond is also a teacher in the Sacramento area. It all depends on where you are. You give me, if you want to know more about learning icons, even if I know of somebody that's teaching here, I'll get you that information. But just so you know, at the monastery, we're going to do a week-long class. You would come Monday through Sunday. Some of that time, we're also going to be teaching you how to pray with an icon. Just like the experience today wasn't just talking about icons, we made some of you suffer, by standing and smelling the holy smoke, and maybe lighting a few candles, and a few of you passing out on the floor, but all of that leading to a deeper, communion with the divine. But for 8 days, 7 days, we would have, and you can stay longer than that as far as I'm concerned, it would be a full program. And where we will teach you how to paint, and everyone goes home with a completed icon. But we would use the egg tempera method. And part of this is that it's to help support the monastery, get people involved with the monastery. It's $500. I'm sorry to be so crude about the money part of it, but if you have a problem with money, you just let me know. And you can sleep in a tent, a few miles away and still come in. But it's actually a pretty good deal, because most icon classes, it's $1,000 for a week, and they're not going to feed you and provide you with a room and a bathroom. Brother Andrew is our guest master, so I brought him along so you can see how friendly he is. Some monks aren't so friendly, but that's why I brought one of the friendly ones. And a couple of the young men that came with us, they can affirm, some days we're nice people. I will admit this will be during Lent, so we are a little crankier. And, but the services are really beautiful. It will be Lent. It could be your Lenten retreat. But if you're interested, I'm going to leave this over here with the pen. Please give us your name and a phone number or email, however you wish to be contacted. And if you want to be in this class, great. It's March 24th through the 30th. That's on here. If you don't want to be in this class but are just interested in coming up to the monastery sometime, let us know. Or if you want to know about something locally or in Sacramento, Raymond, can I grab you? Is he there?